Welcome back to Behind the Smiles. Today, I'm interviewing Susan Gunn. Susan has over 20 years of experience in business automation and financial software. She's a certified Advanced QuickBooks Advisor and a certified fraud examiner. She's a well-known speaker and a prolific author who published 39 books, as well as multiple magazine articles. 39 books. Wow.
Yeah, I'm working on number 40, by the way.
Yay.
I know, it's exciting, and it makes me very tired to think about it even, but that's pretty amazing.
I don't know when you would find time to write all those books. Tell me a little bit about your certified fraud examiner. What does that mean, and how did you get into this?
Well, let me tell you how I got into it. One of my clients in East Texas got embezzled, and it pissed me off. Because I'm really protective of the dental practices. I had set up and trained his front desk employee, and I kept telling him, come here and look at what I'm teaching her. At least learn the reports so that you can oversee and see what she's doing. And he goes, oh, I'm not worried about it. I trust her. And I said, okay. And I tried. It was about 2 years later that he called me and he said, you're not going to believe this, but she did embezzle over $130,000.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And I said, okay, well, now we need to work on you learning. He wasn't in a place to do that, but he did eventually. So it really compelled me to learn more about how to help the practices protect, not only organize their information, their financial information, not only have that back-to-back accountability between the practice software and their QuickBooks or their accountant or whatever they're using for their payables, but to help them organize their practice so that they can have systems and procedures in place to keep it from going out the back door. So I got really into it. So now the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners is an amazing group. They're a worldwide group of over 85,000 people. Oh. And so most of them, by the way, are government, which is interesting. The IRS, which you would expect them to have embezzlement investigators, right? The post office, but lots of different governmental agents, Secret Service, FBI, all those guys have certified fraud examiners. There's very few of us that are actually in what we call private practice. And so you have to have a background that allows you to take the test. And it's a 6-hour test on law and fraud examination techniques, really heavy on the law part. And so I already had a background in criminology. I've already taken business law classes. And so I just really felt like that was something I wanted to offer my clients to help them.
Wow. Wow, and what a great service you provide. And correct me if I'm wrong, I heard that over 50% of dentists will be embezzled from at some point of their career. Is that accurate?
Well, we say 3 out of 5. You know, that's kind of the standard. 60% of the practices are being embezzled from currently.
Wow.
What I've started saying is, if you own a practice for 30 years, you can expect to be embezzled from. That's just common sense. Someone at some time during your 30 years of owning a practice is going to steal something from you, whether that's $647, which was the lowest amount of embezzlement I've had, or 1.1 million, which is the largest case that I've investigated.
That's
so,
great.
Yeah. So it's, it's going to happen. It's, regardless, it's going to happen.
Wow. So tell us, what are the signs that we should be looking out for? How do we know? How do we start to suspect that something is happening?
Well, typically there's going to be a decrease in collections. This is what I hear the most often. I'm working the same. I'm working just as hard as I did last year. My production is even a little bit more, but I'm not having as much money in the bank, and I don't know what's happening. So there could be a lot of things that play into that. Insurance changes, or maybe they took an insurance company where they didn't before. And so there are a lot of different outside things that could affect that dollar volume. But typically that's going to be the first thing. And then they get a little gut stirring that something's not quite right. And so they just want to have it checked out. That's what I hear the most. Something's not right. Something's a little off. And I just want to make sure that they aren't stealing. Because as you alluded to, it's always someone they trust. Always.
I think that's the saddest part. I think besides just being, such a financial hit,
yeah.
Even if it's a small
it's an emotional hit.
But it's an emotional hit.
Yeah.
It's, how does that happen? How does a trusted person suddenly become an embezzler?
Well, I don't know if there's any suddenness to it, but, there are opportunistic embezzlers and there are brazen embezzlers. A brazen embezzler can start off being opportunistic, but then they become brazen. And so, but a brazen embezzler will never return to being opportunistic, because once they get that little taste of what I call greed in their mouth, they want to keep at it because they got away with it. And so once they get away with it, it's like, oh, wow, look, I could buy that purse that I want. I could buy those nice shoes. I could take that vacation if I stole. So they are different in their mindset. We've talked about that before, about the makeup of how their mind works. And the opportunistic ones, it might be that there's a little bit of money in the petty cash. And so they take, a little bit of money from the petty cash, but then it grows from there. They'll do something and they don't get caught. And so then it goes. But when I was growing up, if you didn't have the money to pay for it, you didn't do it. Credit cards were not a big deal. You paid cash. My dad owned a building business, and there were many times that it would be weather like we've had for the last 3 weeks in Texas, where it's all wet and you can't get anything done. And so we had navy beans and cornbread for dinner instead of putting anything on credit card and just going out to eat, which is what we typically do now, right?
Right.
Well, the mindset is that they want it now. They can see it. They see the car the doctor drives. They see the house the doctor lives in. They equate themselves in importance as the doctor.
So what I'm hearing, it's not always the money. It's not that someone is desperate and just really, trying to survive and feed the kids. And it might be sometimes that, but what I'm hearing is that they feel like they deserve it, like it's rightfully theirs, right?
Yeah, I hear a lot. Look at all the patients I brought to the practice. Look at the hours I put in. Now, it's a job and they're getting paid to do that, but that's not how it's happened in their head. I had one embezzler say, my husband helped the doctor build his house. And I asked the doctor, what the heck did the husband do? And he goes, he came over for 30 minutes and gave me some advice on a ditch in the backyard. And I went 30 minutes. But in her head, it equated to, look what I've done, and they're not paying me as much. Now, I will tell you, I've also had embezzlement cases that were theft of service, not really money in their pocket, but were, they had their friends and family in and they didn't charge them as they should. I call that the Robin Hood effect. robbing the rich to help pay for the poor, but the poor might have actually been able to do it, to pay. And that's what happened to my doctor in East Texas. None of her friends paid. Wow. And that's how they caught her. She was sick. And so, it happens. It's this, I don't know. I don't understand it either. And you'll never, I will walk away shaking my head because it's amazing. But we trust them. And that's how we get trapped. I will tell you, it's not wrong to trust. So don't listen to that part. It's wrong to trust blindly. It's right to trust wisely. there is a difference.
That makes a lot of sense. It was actually, you kind of segued into what I wanted to ask you next. And is there a certain type of a leader that is more likely to be embezzled than someone else? Is it the leadership style, or is it the way that the doctor runs the practice that makes him more susceptible, or her?
I think it's that they trust. If they're trusting and they don't have a little bit of that, I am the leader. I will tell you that when I started working in dentistry and helping dentists 21 years ago, there was the mantra out there to do dentistry and let everybody else do the business, to give it over. It evolved to, because I don't think it started there, it evolved to the doctor doing nothing at all. Right. And so everybody else took care of it. Well, then we started seeing the embezzlement cases rise because they were so hands off. But that's not what that means. As long as they have a shingle outside the door, they are a business owner. And business owners have to oversee their business. And so the leader that does not oversee is not really leading, because they're not overseeing. That's the hard part. And I tell them when I speak, if you're not leading your practice, you're not going to like who leads your practice and the results, because it won't be good.
So what I'm hearing you say is trust but verify.
Yes, absolutely.
And so what are the things that we should be doing to monitor our practices, to reports to run, or what is the best business advice to minimize our exposure?
I would say there are three things. There are three things that I would recommend that they make sure that they do. The first is daily deposits. Making sure that as a last patient that walks out that door, that they're printing a deposit report from the practice software, that they're batching out the credit card machine, that a deposit is being made, whatever that means in that practice, that a daily deposit is done. A deposit that says, as of the end of the day, here is the amount of collections that we took. That is printed and it's given to the doctor. The reports that are given to the doctor needs to take and to read them and to oversee them, to manage that practice. The second thing I'd say is back-to-back accountability between the practice software and the QuickBooks. It can be done. That's what I do. It can be done. And it quite easily, quite frankly, I'm not quite sure. Some of the things that I've seen between this accountability between the practice software and QuickBooks has so foggied that picture and made it chaos to where you can't tell. But you should be able to run a report in the practice software for a month, from the 1st of October to the end of October, and the 1st of October and the end of October in QuickBooks, and they should match. And that's what I teach. So it's that putting in the date that the date of service was in the practice software is the date of that deposit in your QuickBooks, and it will match. It doesn't matter if it doesn't hit the bank then. So you've got a back-to-back accountability. The third thing that I'd say, again, is to oversee the reports. If those three things had been done, those big cases that we've had, because my average is about 135, 140,000. That's a lot.
Wow. And
that's not just cash. That's not just credit cards. Those are insurance checks. And so if they oversee, then they would catch that sooner. There is no silver bullet, by the way, in preventing embezzlement. And in fact, the phrase preventing embezzlement is an oxymoron because it's not done. And so you can help find it sooner, but you can't prevent it.
Do you think that if a doctor is paying close attention and the staff knows that the doctor is paying close attention and reading a report, it kind of it minimizes the risk because the
Sure.
opportunistic embezzler is less like, I mean, the brazen one will find a way, right?
The opportunistic one, absolutely, absolutely. And the brazen one will find another place to be employed. That's actually happened. I had a doctor call me one time after, like 6 months after I had spoken, where he had attended. And he said, I just wanted to let you know that I had a new hire that started shortly after, and I had put everything into practice that you suggested. And they quit after 5 minutes because I wouldn't give them control over so many things that would have allowed them to embezzle. He said, I don't know that that's why she quit. And he said, but she kept pressuring me, because that's another thing, pressuring for more that she could be in charge of. And when I wouldn't give her that charge, but I gave it to several different people, she didn't like that. So they will find a place.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Are there any reliable ways to spot a potential embezzler?
Well, the first thing is to do a background report. That might help. 2 of my cases this year's had priors.
Wow.
And so you just, one of them had 4 priors, by the way.
Unbelievable.
Or I wanted to tell your members to go online to my website under media, under articles. I wrote an article called Let No Background Go Unchecked. And so I wrote that as a response to this embezzlement case I was doing, because I don't know why in dentistry we don't do background checks. It's really important. And I've had a dozen cases where it could have been caught because I had a prior. We should be informed and making wise decisions on our employees. And so we need to do the background checks.
That's very good advice. We'll be sure to link the article in the show notes as well. So let me ask you a question. If we suspect that something is, like if we get that gut feeling that something is going on, what are the things to do? What should be done first?
Not talking to anyone in the practice. That's the first thing.
You don't want to tip anyone off.
Oh my gosh, that's the biggest mistake I've seen. They'll go to them and say, hey, where's this deposit? Or why isn't this cash here? Or where has this been? Unknowingly, and it goes to that trust that we talked about, because they trust them and they think, there's no way she would steal from me, right? So they think that that's okay, but oh my gosh, now they know that the doctor's aware something's not right. So not talking to anybody in the practice, call me. Let's talk. I give a 1-hour free consultation.
Wow, that's very generous.
Well, after I speak, I get a lot of phone calls, just to let you know, because they're all paranoid that something's going on. And so I want to make sure that the paranoia is genuine. So we talk it out, and I tell them to actually look at a few things. This is no charge. I tell them to look at a couple of things and to call me back. And when they call me back, if they're still not convinced, then we do what I call the Ask the Expert phone call. And it's a 2-hour phone call, and we remote in. I remote in to their practice, and it's while they're on the phone. And I spend 2 hours showing them what I see through my eyes. And so I'm training them on what to look at the same time, but I'm looking for signs of embezzlement. I'm comparing reports and looking at reports, and it's a great phone call, because I can show them how I read an audit trail, or what I'm seeing in their adjustments, or what I see in their deposit reports. And so that's the first thing I would do. Call me, don't talk to anybody else, because they'll stir up suspicion that something's wrong, and to act normal. That's the second thing. The third thing is to document everything that they think or that they hear. And the fourth thing that I tell them is to make a backup of the practice software as of that day. So that's called evidence, by the way.
Right.
So as it's needed, then they've got it.
I think the point about backup is a very good point, because we deal with technology, with practices, and we often see that there is no reliable backup in place, verifiable backup in place, and
Right.
so there should be one done every day, but especially in this kind of circumstance, it's if you suspect something, definitely make sure it's not erasable backup, so you have the information as of that date.
Absolutely. I'm always still amazed that there are the tape backups that exist in practices now. I would imagine those tapes are getting harder to be found to purchase, which always makes me leery that maybe they haven't had a new tape in a while. And so I don't consider that a reliable form, as you said.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting. I saw a post on Dentaltown the other day. Somebody purchased the practice, and they said we need to clean up our accounts because insurance was billed from the software, but the payments were never entered. And so everyone had an outstanding claim, and I can't imagine operating under such a messy data entry process. And to me, it's just, it signaled that there might be something going on. I mean, I can't imagine any other reason to do that.
I will tell you, if the more chaos I see, the more I'm determined to find out what they were really doing. And almost all of the embezzlement investigators would tell you the same thing, that when it's chaotic for a reason. And very, very, very rarely when it's really organized is there any embezzlement going on. Because when it's organized, there's accountability. And if there's accountability, then it's kind of hard to have that happen.
Right. Absolutely.
Doesn't mean it doesn't,
but yeah, it's a great point. All the more reasons to review office systems and make sure that everything is done properly and that software utilized properly. And you made a great point about QuickBooks earlier. Are there any specific, because, with embezzlement, it's not just the money going in, it could be other things. So what are the reports in QuickBooks that we need to be looking at?
Well, the first thing is you need an organized QuickBooks so that you can do that back-to-back accountability like I suggested. And so that means how the money is deposited is really important, that those are the income types set up in QuickBooks. How it hits the bank, you've got 3 entities. You've got it going from the practice software to the bank to the QuickBooks. And so you need to have cash and checks, credit cards, care credit for a separate income account, so that you can compare those amounts with what your deposit report says to know if they match. And then if they don't match, the best part about that is if they don't match, then you know where they don't match, because you're breaking it down. As far as the expenses need to be grouped together as well. And so that you know the total amount of the employees, the total amount of the facility, the total amount of your minor expenses, and the total amount of the doctor, so that they're organized in such a way that you can oversee it very readily. I never recommend accounting numbers unless they're an accountant. If they're an accountant, then fine, leave the accounting numbers on. But if nobody in the practice is an accountant, or best, the one that's using QuickBooks, then turn them off. Use words you understand. So simplify the words. I actually had somebody one time ask me, is there a dictionary to understand all this accounting terminology? I went, no, but we can change it. So let's just change it so that you understand it. And I literally went through the list with them and said, what word do you use for this? What word do you use for that? And made it for them so that they would use it. Because you know what? If you don't understand that chart of accounts, you're not going to use it. You'll use 4 or 5 accounts and that's it. So, yeah.
That's very true. And it's hard to verify when your categories don't match, then all of a sudden you have to do, you have to jump through a lot of hoops to figure out, if you're depositing everything that you should be depositing.
Well, I also recommend downloading downloading into the bank and downloading credit card transactions. Most practices these days are downloading or paying for everything with credit card. Very few of them are doing checks. And so if you download into your QuickBooks your credit card charges, it's so much easier. So now you've got accountability and ease.
Right. And you can, for each transaction, you can allocate a specific category, and then not only helps you make better practice management decisions,
exactly,
because you know what you're spending money on, but you can also track transactions that shouldn't have been there, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. So let's say that, you know, that there is embezzlement. How do we make sure that the embezzler does get prosecuted? What needs to happen? Because my understanding is a lot of them don't. And in fact, my understanding is a lot of dentists don't want to, for some reason.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's fear of confrontation or retaliation or what is it?
Well, you might have hit on that with the first one, because, you know, it's a personality thing. They typically don't like confrontation. Sorry, you're in that, right? But I mean, really, nobody likes confrontation. I've had lots of different phone calls over the years. I had one guy that told, when I was encouraging him to investigate and prosecute, he told me I was not a very merciful person and I wasn't forgiving, and that he was just going to keep her in the practice and let her pay back what she owed him. Of course, he had no idea how much she had stolen, but, you know, okay, that was his choice. Not wise, but his choice. I have them often just want to know so they can terminate the employment. But I've also had them come to me at speaking saying, I went to the police and told them what was going on, but they did nothing. You need to understand, the police don't know dental practice software. They don't know all the ins and outs of pulling that together for prosecution. And they don't have the resources to do that, quite frankly. And so going to the police department with your suspicions doesn't work. You've got to have a report. And so what I do is I compile all the evidence together. I compile all the supporting documentation, examples of the embezzlement, spreadsheets, everything that I need, and prepare all that and give it to the doctor to take to law enforcement. Once so knock on wood, I always be really careful about saying this. I've never had one that didn't plead guilty. And so if the evidence is there, it's kind of hard to refute the evidence.
Right.
And so when it's compiled in that way, and I'm very thorough and extremely analytical, and so it's compiled in such a way that people understand it. So I write it knowing that it could go before a jury and that everybody would understand it. And so they take that to the police department, the law enforcement, and then they file. And the only time that I've had someone argue is about how much was stolen. But again, it was all in the evidence. It's kind of hard to refute. They actually get 2 reports with me because I don't want it to happen to them again. And so the second report says what I found and what systems and procedures I recommend that they implement in their practice. And we spend a couple of hours after the fact working on that, on tightening their controls in the practice, so that I hope, though I enjoy and love all of my clients, really hope that they don't call me again with another embezzlement, because that would make me feel bad and feel like I didn't do my job. And so that's part of my job, not only just compiling, but helping them get to that point where it doesn't happen again. I also I walk through to the very end for them. Sometimes I've written victim statements for them, told them what they should ask, after talking with them, and them talking to their attorneys, and sometimes a conference call with the attorney and the doctor and I on coming up with a plan for what to ask as far as the reimbursement. Most of mine, in fact, I think all of them have gotten retribution of the payments. Yeah. So I don't understand when they say they didn't get anything back, because it might not be as much. I mean, the 1.1 million still working on getting his back. And they set them up with a payment plan over time, so it's not going to be immediate, but they do get money back. It's also important too, by the way, to make sure that in their liability insurance, it's mostly only 10,000, 15,000, maybe 20,000. They need to get an additional rider, which really doesn't cost that much, for up to 200,000.
That's excellent advice. I didn't realize it was something that was available separately.
Right. When my average is 135, 140,000, 10, 20 doesn't cut it. Doesn't cut it.
Yeah, I'm sure. How do we, so you talked a little bit about the background checks. For someone who's not familiar with doing background checks, what's the process? What's a typical process for that?
Well, you have to get hold of a company and set it up. You're not going to do it yourself, and I don't do them either. But there's a company out there. I interviewed 3 different companies, and I'm comfortable with the one that I ended up with, and it's called Good Hire.
Good Hire?
Yeah, and so that's in that article that I talk about. There's a list in that article, by the way.
Oh, great.
Yes, exact information that they need to get to find out if they have, and the pitfalls of a background check too, because they're not all perfect. Some counties, some states don't do some information. And so just like not all practice software is created equally, not all banks are created equally, neither are the background checks. And so, but I gave all the pitfalls and everything and the things to ask for in a background check in that article.
Excellent, thank you. And I suppose that if someone does have something on their record and the background check is brought up, that's probably going to kind of deter them from pursuing the job, right?
Probably, and if they know they're going to do a background check, it would keep them from doing it. All I had to do was Google one of my suspects, and they popped up.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, you can Google, you can look at them on Facebook, which I encourage you doing. You can find out certain things, you know. You can find out if they've won the lottery before, which is what one of them said, the reason they had so much money. Not once, not twice, but 3 times they won the lottery. That would hit the news. It wasn't there. So.
Wow, unbelievable. So let me ask you a question. What percentage, and I don't know if you know this, but roughly what percentage of all embezzlement cases end up being caught and prosecuted?
I don't have a clue. I will say probably 50% of my phone calls decide to just figure out a way to get rid of the employee and to move on. Now, what happens is that employee moves on right down the road because now they're brazen, right?
Because they didn't.
Yeah.
They got caught, but they didn't get anything for it.
It's like a 2-year-old with their hand in the cookie jar. They're going to do it again, even if they got caught. And so, because the reward was really nice. And so they're going to go right down the road, which is what my 1.1 million, by the way, was embezzling. The FBI went and interviewed the prior dentist, and he suspected all along that she had been embezzling from him, but he just decided to let her go on something else. And so she went down to my client and stole 1.1 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, unbelievable. And, you know, a part of me wonders if they have some sort of a almost hold on that dentist in a way. And
that's happened too. That's happened too. Probably 30% of the ones that I've had have had affairs, or they know that the dentist is doing something unethical or illegal. And
wow.
That is an open door to, for bribery. And we've had one that everybody knows about in the United States that state hopped and had affairs with the doctors and would embezzle at the same time. And so, yeah, and that could be part of the brazen one's MO, you know? Hi, how's it going? Oh my goodness, you had a hard day. You know, oh, here, let me rub your shoulders, you know, getting in, you know, and it feels nice. But then when you find out that they've been embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars, you have no recourse. You know, you do. You actually do have a recourse, but you think you have no recourse.
Yeah, you feel trapped.
Same thing I've seen. They're afraid of the whistleblower mentality too, with the IRS for not filing taxes, which is something you asked about the leadership. So let me address this because it is one of my pain points, I guess is how I say that, is the ethical side of running a dentist practice. If you accept the money as a patient revenue, as collections, that revenue needs to go to the bank, not in your pocket. And that's happening a lot. Doctors are not depositing the cash, they're pocketing the cash because they don't want to account for it with the IRS. Okay, really? There's not that much cash any day nowadays, right? Unless you live in a rural area where there is a lot of cash payments. That still happens. But mostly not much cash. But then what happens is you might avoid the IRS, but your staff sees you do that, sees you pocketing the cash. And that's setting the tone that it's okay to steal from the government, so it must be okay for me to steal from you. And that's, I mean, it's a dilemma. That's a huge dilemma. That's an ethical dilemma in the practice. And so I've had so many come to Jesus meetings with doctors about that very thing. It's not that you're just avoiding paying taxes, because that's tax evasion, by the way. And if you were caught, they will make an example out of you and you will do prison time. But besides that aside, what are you telling your staff when you do that? That's a problem.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. So I guess one of the lessons here is that we have to create systems that are traceable. We have to be ethical in our practices. And hopefully that's the leadership that, we kind of establish the right systems that discourage those who might take the opportunity and those who have priors. If we do background checks, what are some other things that we should be doing? Or
right back to what we said in the beginning, trust wisely. Be the business owner and trust wisely. So, it's okay to delegate responsibilities to people, but then that doesn't mean that you're giving it away. You're delegating it, but you will oversee it. And so get the reports that you need. If you don't know what systems and controls you need in your practice, don't ignore it. Find out, what do you need to do for your practice? The Ask the Expert service that I offer cost very little. And it's one of the reasons that I developed it, was to help them develop the systems and procedures for the practice. They work with me for 2 hours and then they've got homework that they can put into place and they may never call me back again. I'm okay with that. They've learned. It's educate yourself. Take the classes. That's another thing. If you see classes in areas that you don't understand, take them. Be the smartest one in the practice software, not the one that knows the least. you know?
I think I find that often dentists do not know how to operate their software. They don't really know what's happening at the front office. You know, they're more involved with the systems in the back, but the front office is something that someone else does. And I think, you know, not only it makes it more difficult for them to manage the practice, it probably sets them up for.
Well, totally sets them up, because then that means they probably don't have admin rights, you know? So that totally sets them up. Anything can happen then. I had a doctor tell me one time that he was one of the first implementers of EagleSoft. And I said, oh my gosh, you must be the master wizard of EagleSoft then. He goes, I don't know anything about it. I said, you're kidding me. Not a thing? He goes, not a thing. He didn't know. And so I said, okay, you seriously gotta learn. And in today's environment, that's really, that's not an excuse. There is no excuse not to learn, because every practice software has videos, and they can go in and they can learn everything that they want to know. All they have to do, when I don't know what report to run in a software because I'm trying to find something specific, I Google. Dr. Google is my friend. Love Dr. Google.
Let me ask you a question. I'm curious, when you go in and there's embezzlement going on, do you find that the other team members also suspect something, but they never say anything? Or how does that work?
You know, that hasn't happened. Just to let you know, you would think. But what ends up happening is, because the front office manager, who's typically the one that steals, or someone else at the front desk, they will typically alienate everyone else. They'll pit the doctor against the employees, and they'll pit the employees against the doctor, so that they're the safe island, so to speak. But then nobody wants to approach them about anything. The 1.1 million, they actually saw her walk down the hall with cash in her hand several different times. And they told me. They always wondered. And I said, well, why didn't you say something to the doctor? Well, you know, we were afraid of her. So when I asked the doctor, you suspected, why didn't you say something to her? He goes, oh, I'm afraid of her too. Everybody was afraid of her, so nobody said anything. But that's happened. Their behavior will get a little off. In actually one of my cases this year, the behavior of the front office person was a little off. And so one of the assistants said something to the doctor. However, I've also had them talk about the behavior to the doctor of another person, and they were trying to cover up for something they were doing.
Oh, well.
That happened in another case. They were trying to deflect their action in what they were doing. They were calling in scripts illegally.
Wow.
For themselves, yeah. Trying to get the other person fired at the front desk.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm always really careful about that. And when the doctor calls and says, someone else told me, and I go, oh, that's nice, I'll mark that down. But I'm pretty sure, let's really weigh this logically.
Tell me a little bit about the book that you're working on right now.
Oh, it's pretty exciting. With the advent of QuickBooks Online, which I don't recommend.
I've heard you say that before.
I just want to make sure that's clear. I really do not recommend QuickBooks Online. It is not a viable accounts payable, and it's not HIPAA compliant. So if you do any patient reimbursements, you are not in compliance. So having said that, several organizations are out there that will encourage people to use QuickBooks Online. With the advent of so many different things, what I want to do is just give you the systems and procedures and things you need to think about in the financial organization of your practice. And so the book's called Money In, Money Out, a financial organization for your practice. I'm so excited about it. I keep adding to it. I will eventually finish. My deadline was the 7th of November. I'm really hoping Natalie doesn't hear that past tense was, because I'll get in trouble. It's still 7th. But it's going to be offered on Amazon too. The other books are QuickBooks specific and the steps how to do this. But I talk about the organized accountability. What do you do at the end of the day, step by step? What do you do once a month? What do you do once a quarter? What do you do once a year? I talk about how do you choose a bank? What do you need from the bank? How do you choose a merchant card service? What do you need from the merchant card service? What about insurance, and how do you enter insurance payments? How do you set up your practice software to be accountable to your accounts payable software? You have two systems to make up one accounting package. And so how does all of that work together? And then how do you find a CPA, and how do you work with that CPA? As well as I do have a section on there, a chapter on QuickBooks and working with QuickBooks. Very small, because there's other books for that.
Right.
As well as employees. What are the best practices with your employees, and what do you need to do there? And so it's kind of a full, easy read book that gives exact information on organization.
Thank you for explaining that. Sounds like a great primer. Sounds like something that everyone should read if they run a business, and we'll definitely be looking out for that. Are you speaking anywhere soon?
I am. I have the Washington AGD. It's a mastermind group. I'm presenting up there an all-day course. I am so excited about that course. All day. I get to tell them everything all day. I'm so excited, because usually I only have a couple hours or 3 hours, and you can't put all the information in there. I love study clubs because I'm not fighting with the convention with the Invisalign course down the road. So they really want to learn, because it's just me and they've come. And so it's a more of an interested, attentive audience. Anything that I can do to work myself out of the job, that'd be awesome. To not have embezzlement, that'd be awesome.
How can our customers find you?
www.susangunnsolutions.com. Wow, that sounded really Texan-y, didn't it? www.Susan Gunn, Gunn. You know, I am in Texas, but there's another N on the end of that Gunn. Solutions, more than one solution.com.
Thank you. I hope you'll come back and talk to us some more.
Would love to.